Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I had grown up with her in the background of my life. To everyone else, she was Aunt Claire, my mother's younger sister, the one with the free spirit and a laugh that could fill a room. She was there at birthdays and holidays, sometimes, vanishing for years at a time before suddenly reappearing with stories of places I had never been and people I'd never meet. To me, she was family, untouchable, safe. The kind of presence that you never question because it feels too solid, too established to ever bend or break. I called her Aunt Claire with the same easy familiarity that a child calls for their mother when they're hurt, or their father when they need help. But life, as I would later learn, has a way of twisting the familiar until it feels like something altogether new. The change didn't happen overnight. It never does. It started small, the way storms always start with a faint shift in the air before the lightning ever cracks. I was 22 when I began to notice her differently. She had come to stay with us for a few months, claiming she wanted to be closer to family after her second divorce. I didn't think much of it at first. She was still Aunt Claire, still that same woman with warm eyes and a mischievous smile. Except, she wasn't. I noticed it one afternoon when she walked into the kitchen. I was fixing myself a sandwich, and she stood by the window, sunlight catching in her hair. She wore a loose white blouse, the kind that shifted with every breath, and when she laughed at something I said, an ordinary, throwaway comment, her hand touched my shoulder in passing. A simple touch, but it lingered. Just long enough for me to feel the heat of her skin after she'd moved away. I shook it off. She was my aunt. My mother's sister, family. But my chest felt different that day. Like something heavy had settled there. The weeks that followed blurred into something complicated. She began spending more time with me, asking about my life, about my dreams, about the parts of myself I rarely shared with anyone. Her attention was intoxicating. She listened in a way no one else did. When she looked at me, really looked, it was as though the rest of the world disappeared. One night, it happened. The night everything shifted. I was in my room reading when there was a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, she was standing there barefoot, wrapped in a light sweater. Her hair was down, her face bare of makeup. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Of course. I said yes. She sat at the edge of my bed, fingers tracing the seam of the blanket, quiet for a long time. Then she whispered my name. Not the casual, half-distracted way she always had. Not the way family does. This time it was different, slow, deliberate, tender. The syllables rolled off her tongue like they were something precious. Something she had no right to say, but couldn't hold back. It was the first time in my life I felt my heart stop, then race so fast it threatened to leap out of my chest. "Aunt Claire," I started, but she shook her head quickly, her hand reaching for mine. "Don't call me that, not tonight." Her voice was low, trembling, full of something I didn't yet know how to name but could feel all the same. That night, everything I thought I knew about love, about family, about boundaries, was rewritten in the quiet of my room. We didn't need to say much. Every glance, every hesitant brush of fingers, every stolen breath between us was enough. It wasn't loud or desperate. It was quiet, aching, inevitable. The days after were a blur of secrecy. We stole moments where we could, in the kitchen when no one else was around, in the garden where shadows hid us, in the way her hand would slip into mine for just a second too long before she let go. And always it was that whisper of my name that haunted me, that reminded me that what we shared was wrong but irresistible. I was torn. She was my aunt. But she wasn't just that anymore. She was the woman who saw me, who touched me in ways no one else had, who broke through the walls I didn't even know I built. Love, when it comes, doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about rules or titles or the words people use to define relationships. It just happens, wild and consuming, and leaves you standing at the edge of everything you once believed. staring into something dangerous, but impossibly beautiful. And that's where I found myself, standing on that edge with her, unable to turn back. Because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't call her Aunt Claire anymore. Not after the way she whispered my name that night. She didn't come to my room again for several nights after that. But the silence wasn't empty, it was charged, as if the air in the house had shifted permanently. Every time I passed her, in the hallway, every time she poured herself coffee in the kitchen while I lingered nearby, it felt as though we were both pretending that nothing had happened, while at the same time our bodies betrayed us with stolen glances and the faintest hesitation before moving apart. It was maddening. I'd lie awake at night, my mind replaying the way her voice had wrapped itself around my name, how her hand had lingered on mine, how her presence had unsettled everything I thought I understood. I told myself it couldn't happen again, that the line was too sacred, too dangerous to cross, but wanting her had become as natural as breathing. One evening, I came home later than usual. My mother had gone to stay with a friend for the weekend, and the house was unnaturally quiet. I found Claire in the living room, curled on the couch with a glass of wine, the lamp beside her casting soft shadows over her face. She smiled when she saw me, a small, tired smile, and patted the seat beside her. We sat close, too close. The scent of her wine lingered in the air between us, sweet and heavy, and when she shifted, her shoulder brushed against mine. Neither of us moved away. My pulse hammered in my chest, and the silence grew thick, weighted with everything we weren't saying. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered again, my name slipping past her lips like a secret. Something in me broke. I turned to her and she didn't pull away. Her eyes held mine, vulnerable and burning at the same time, and before I realized what I was doing, I leaned in. Our lips met tentatively at first, like we were both afraid of shattering the moment. But then her hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss until all thought of right and wrong was gone. From that night, there was no turning back. We lived in fragments of time, carving out moments that didn't belong to us but felt stolen from the universe itself. Early mornings in the kitchen when the house was still asleep, her fingers grazing mine as she passed me a cup of coffee. Afternoons in the garden where she'd brush soil from my hand, her touch lingering just long enough to remind me of everything waiting beneath the surface. Nights when we'd find each other again, unable to resist the gravity that seemed to pull us together. It wasn't just passion, though the passion was there, raw, insistent, impossible to ignore. It was something deeper. In her presence, I felt understood in a way I never had before. She knew how to look past my silence, how to draw out the parts of me I thought I had to keep hidden. And when I held her, I could feel the years of loneliness she carried, the longing she buried beneath her laughter, the ache of all the places she traveled without ever really finding home. She told me once, in a rare, unguarded moment, that she had always felt invisible in her marriages, that her ex-husbands had loved versions of her that didn't exist anymore, and that maybe she was too much for anyone to truly see. I told her she wasn't invisible to me. She smiled, but her eyes glistened with tears she wouldn't let fall. The danger of it all made every touch sharper, every kiss more desperate. We knew we were treading a line that could never be revealed, that if anyone found out, everything would unravel. And yet, the secrecy bound us even tighter. There was a kind of freedom in the danger, a fire that burned hotter because it wasn't allowed. Sometimes, when I woke with her beside me, I would forget who she was to the world, forget the word aunt, forget everything but the way her hand rested against my chest as though it belonged there. But then daylight would come, and with it the reality of what we were risking. The guilt crept in at odd times when I saw my mother smiling at her sister across the dinner table, or when Claire laughed with my cousins as though everything were simple and ordinary. It wasn't simple. It never could be. Still, when night came, the pull between us was undeniable. I began to live for those stolen hours, for the sound of her whispering my name in the dark, for the way her body curled into mine as though it had been waiting for me all along. I knew it couldn't last forever. Nothing like that ever does. But in those weeks, in those stolen nights, we existed in a world of our own making. One where love defied rules and names and the weight of what was forbidden. And even as fear and guilt gnawed at me, even as the shadow of discovery loomed over us, I couldn't bring myself to let go Dot, because when she looked at me, when she touched me, when she whispered my name with that fragile hunger in her voice, I didn't feel like the boy who had grown up calling her aunt. I felt like the man she had chosen, the man she had let in, the man who finally saw her for who she really was. And in the quiet between us, I realized I was already too far gone to ever turn back. Dot, it wasn't long before the walls of secrecy began to close in. What had once felt like an intoxicating dream slowly turned into a reality that neither of us could ignore. Each time we were together, the rush was there, the fire that consumed us both, the tenderness that left me aching when she wasn't near. But the fear grew too. The fear that someone would hear a door closing at the wrong hour, that someone would notice the way her eyes lingered on me longer than they should, that someone would see the truth written across my face. When she whispered my name, the first time it nearly came undone was at a family gathering. My mother had organized a small dinner for relatives, and Clara arrived early to help. I watched her move through the kitchen, her laughter filling the room, her hands brushing mine briefly as she passed me a tray. To anyone else, it was nothing. To me, it was fire. I could barely focus, my eyes following her without permission, my body tensing whenever someone stood too close to her, as if they might see what belonged only to me. Dot, at one point, she glanced across the table, her eyes meeting mine for the briefest second. It was nothing more than that, just a glance, but I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked away quickly, but my cousin caught it. He smirked, nudged me, and whispered that I must have a crush on her. I laughed it off, but inside, panic clawed at me. Did it show? Could they all see what was happening right beneath their noses? That night, after everyone had left, I found her in the hallway, her body pressed against the wall as though she'd been waiting for me. She pulled me into the shadows, her lips crashing into mine with a desperation that nearly unhinged me. "We can't keep doing this here," she whispered against my mouth, her voice trembling, but neither of us moved away. Her hands clutched at me as though letting go would break her apart. I held her just as tightly, my heart hammering against hers, both of us aware that the walls we had built were paper thin, ready to collapse at any moment. Dot, we started meeting outside the house after that. Late night drives that took us to empty. Back roads where no one would think to look. Hotel rooms on the edge of town, dimly lit and smelling faintly of cigarettes and old linens, where we could exist as ourselves without fear of discovery. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. In those rooms, I learned every inch of her, not just her body, but her fears, her regrets, the weight of her past. She opened herself to me completely, and I did the same, but passion has a way of leaving. Marks. Once, after a night where neither of us could seem to let the other go, she walked into the house with her hair still slightly damp, her lips faintly swollen. My mother noticed. She asked if Claire was feeling unwell. I froze my stomach, dropping, but Claire laughed it off smoothly, saying she'd stayed up late watching a movie. My mother accepted it, but I saw the faintest flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Thought it was moments like that which reminded us how fragile everything was. And yet, despite the danger, despite the mounting fear, neither of us could stop. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was love deep, terrifying love that neither of us had asked for, but both of us had fallen into without escape. One evening, as we lay tangled in the sheets of another nameless hotel room, she traced her fingers over my chest, her eyes thoughtful. "If this ever comes out," she said softly, "it will ruin everything. Your mother, your cousins, they'll never forgive us." I know, I admitted, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I can't lose you. Even if it ruins me, I can't lose you." She looked at me then, really looked, as though weighing whether my words were a promise or a curse. Finally, she pressed her lips to mine and whispered, then we'll just have to hold on until we can't anymore. The truth was, I didn't know what that meant. How long could we hide? How long before someone saw through the lies? But in that moment, I didn't care. All I cared about was the woman in my arms, the woman who had once been nothing more than a figure at family dinners, a name tied to memories of childhood, and who had now become the center of everything I was. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the line we had crossed only grew more blurred. Every time she whispered my name, it felt less like a secret and more like a truth neither of us could live without. But truth has a way of demanding to be seen. And deep down, I knew the day was coming when our secret would no longer be just ours. The day our secret finally cracked open didn't arrive with fireworks or screaming. It came quietly, like a crack spreading through glass, too small to notice at first. Then, suddenly impossible to ignore. It was a Sunday afternoon. One of those lazy days when the air smelled faintly of coffee and the sound of church bells drifted through the neighborhood. My mother had invited the family for lunch, and Claire came, as she always did, carrying a dish of her homemade lasagna. She smiled and laughed in the kitchen, slipping seamlessly into her role, but I could feel her eyes on me even when I wasn't looking. Every stolen glance sent a current through me, but I forced myself to act normal. After lunch, when everyone moved to the living room, I followed Claire to the hallway under the pretense of helping her carry dishes. She handed me a plate, her fingers brushing mine just a second too long. "Stop looking at me like that," she whispered, though her lips curved in the faintest smile. Before I could answer, the sound of footsteps came. My cousin appeared at the end of the hall, carrying a glass. He froze, watching us for a moment too long before continuing into the kitchen. My heart slammed in my chest. Had he seen? Had he noticed the way my hand lingered on hers? That night, when we finally met in the quiet safety of her car parked on a dark street, Claire's hands trembled against the steering wheel. "This is getting too dangerous," she whispered. "They're starting to see it. I can feel it." I reached for her hand, my thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I don't care who sees, I just care about you." Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "You don't understand. If this comes out, I lose everything. My marriage, my place in this family, your mother's trust. And you," she stopped, her breath shuddering. "You lose everyone too." I pulled her hand to my lips, kissing her fingers. "Then let them all burn. None of them matter the way you do." Her resistance melted. She turned to me, and the kiss that followed was fierce, desperate, as if both of us were trying to carve our names into each other's souls. Before the world took it all away, our meetings grew riskier after that. A late-night run to the grocery store turned into stolen kisses in the parking lot. A family barbecue became unbearable torture as I watched her move across the lawn, her laughter mingling with the hum of cicadas, her smile so bright that everyone believed it was real. Only I knew how much she longed to sneak away, to escape into the shadows with me. One night, she invited me over when her husband was away on business. The house felt strange, familiar, yet foreign, because I had been inside it countless times. As a child, but never like this. She led me to the living room, her hand trembling in mine, her lips searching for reassurance in every kiss. "I used to sit here," she whispered against my mouth, "and imagine what it would feel like if someone truly saw me. Not as a wife, not as the woman who holds everything together, but just me. And then you looked at me one day and it all changed." I kissed her harder, pulling her against me, and for the first time, the walls around us didn't feel suffocating. They felt like ours. That night, every touch was softer, every kiss slower, not just passion, but something deeper. We weren't just stealing moments. We were building something fragile and beautiful in a world that wasn't meant for us. But the more we built, the harder it became to pretend. My mother began asking questions. She noticed how often I slipped out at night, how distracted I seemed at the dinner table. One evening, she asked directly, her eyes sharp and searching, "Is there someone you're not telling me about?" The words lodged in my throat, but before I could stumble through an excuse, Claire walked into the room carrying a tray of tea. My mother's gaze flicked between us, lingering too long, and in that silence, I knew she saw more than I wanted her to. The air grew heavier after that. Every family gathering felt like walking a tightrope, every stolen glance carrying the weight of discovery. And yet, neither of us could stop. If anything, the fear only drove us closer. Each meeting felt more urgent, more desperate, as though we were racing against time. One night, as we lay tangled together in a hotel room that smelled of rain-soaked air and fading perfume, she pressed her forehead against mine. "Promise me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't regret this. You won't regret us." I held her face in my hands, staring into the eyes that had undone me. "I'll never regret you. Even if it destroys everything, I'll never regret you." Her tears slid down her cheeks, and when I kissed them away, I knew we were both clinging to a love that was as impossible as it was unstoppable. And yet, somewhere deep down, I could feel the storm building. Secrets like ours didn't stay hidden forever, and when it broke, it wouldn't just take us, it would take everything in its path.